The early 20th century marked the final frontier in global terrestrial exploration, with one geographical prize remaining, the South Pole. This epical contest, forever etched in the annals of exploration, was a dramatic demonstration of contrasting strategies, national pride, and the brutal indifference of the Antarctic continent. The primary antagonists in this high-stakes venture were Robert Falcon Scott of Britain and Roald Amundsen of Norway, representing two fundamentally different approaches to polar survival and success. Preparations and philosophical divergence. The genesis of the race can be traced to the near-simultaneous preparations of the two expeditions. Robert Falcon Scott, already a celebrated figure from his earlier discovery expedition, 1901-1904, commanded the British Antarctic expedition, 1910-1919, aboard the ship Terra Nova. Scott's approach was meticulously planned, yet often hampered by a reliance on what could be termed a mixed transport system. This system included Manchurian ponies, motor sledges, a relatively untested technology in extreme cold, and the traditional, perhaps sentimental, reliance on man-hauling for the final leg. His expedition's primary objective was not solely geographical conquest, but was explicitly multidisciplinary, encompassing significant scientific research, glaciology, meteorology, and geology. Scott viewed the expedition as a grand, comprehensive national undertaking, embodying the contemporary ideal of British imperial exploration, a spirit that valued stoicism and intellectual contribution alongside physical achievement. Conversely, Roald Amundsen, a seasoned Arctic explorer who had successfully navigated the Northwest Passage, harbored a singular, laser-focused ambition to be the first man at the South Pole. His expedition, aboard the Fram, was initially intended for the North Pole, but upon learning that Robert Peary had already claimed the northern objective in 1909, Amundsen secretly diverted his course south. This change of focus underscored Amundsen's pragmatic, goal-oriented methodology. His strategy was rooted deeply in the proven techniques of Inuit and Sami survival. Dog sledging. Amundsen understood the efficiency and reliability of dogs as transport, fuel, if necessary, and companions. His equipment, sledges, and clothing were meticulously chosen for their practicality, not their appearance or novelty. He employed Norwegian ski experts and focused relentlessly on speed, efficiency, and the conservation of energy. For Amundsen, success was a function of expertise and adaptation, not heroic struggle. The Antarctic setting and base camps. Both expeditions established their bases in the Ross Sea region of Antarctica, but their locations proved strategically significant. Scott set up his main base at Cape Evans on Ross Island, situated about 64 kilometers, 40 miles north of the operational starting point of his previous expedition. This location offered a robust, relatively comfortable base for his scientific endeavors, but placed him further from the pole's final ascent route than his rival. Amundsen established his base, named Framheim, home of the Fram, in the Bay of Whales on the Ross Ice Shelf. Crucially, Framheim was approximately 96 kilometers, 60 miles closer to the pole than Cape Evans. While potentially more precarious due to its location on the mobile ice shelf, this choice immediately offered Amundsen a critical head start. Furthermore, Amundsen's team dedicated the entire winter of 1911 to preparing and laying extensive supply depots along their proposed route, a foundational element of his successful logistical plan. These depots were marked with flags on both sides of the line of travel, guaranteeing they wouldn't be missed. The dash and contrasting logistics. The actual race began in the Antarctic spring of 1911. Amundsen's party, consisting of 5 men, 4 sledges, and 52 dogs, departed Framheim on October 19, 1911. Their journey was a textbook example of efficiency. The dogs, expertly handled and well-fed, covered long distances quickly. Amundsen maintained a conservative daily mileage, ensuring the animals and men were never overextended. The team followed a path that avoided significant geographical obstacles, primarily ascending the Axel Heiberg Glacier, which Amundsen's party expertly navigated to reach the polar plateau. A key, though morally controversial, aspect of Amundsen's logistics was the calculated culling of excess dogs at strategically positioned supply depots. This provided fresh meat for the remaining dogs and the men, ensuring their nutritional needs were met and lightening the load. Scott's polar party, which ultimately consisted of 5 men, departed Cape Evans later on November 1911. Their journey was fraught with logistical issues. The motor sledges quickly broke down, forcing an early reliance on the ponies. However, the ponies proved inadequate for the deep snow and low temperatures of the interior, and they too had to be euthanized early in the journey. The final ascent to the plateau became an arduous man-hauling exercise. Hauling heavy sledges over rugged terrain in polar gear demanded immense energy, drastically reducing the speed and taxing the physical and psychological reserves of the men. Furthermore, Scott's route involved traversing the challenging, heavily crevassed Beardmore Glacier, a geographically more complex path than Amundsen's. The pole and the tragic return Amundsen's party arrived at the South Pole on December 14, 1911. They had achieved their goal with remarkable speed and relatively minimal hardship, covering the approximately 1,400-mile round trip in 99 days. Amundsen spent 3 days at the pole, meticulously taking astronomical observations to confirm his position and leaving behind a tent and a letter for Scott, along with a note for the King of Norway. This act, while perhaps a gesture of courtesy, also served as definitive proof of his priority. The return journey was executed with the same professionalism, and the party arrived back at Framheim on January 25, 1912. Scott and his 4 companions, Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, Lawrence Oates, and Edgar Evans, reached the pole on January 17, 1912, a devastating 34 days after Amundsen. The sight of Amundsen's tent and the Norwegian flag was a profound psychological blow. Scott recorded in his diary the despair of the moment. "Great God, this is an awful place and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority." The return journey for Scott's team rapidly devolved into a tragedy. The men were already exhausted, undernourished, and suffering from exposure. The absence of reliable transport, unlike Amundsen's remaining dog teams, meant they had to man-haul their sledges against increasingly severe weather, compounded by exceptionally low temperatures and persistent blizzards that season. Edgar Evans was the first to perish on February 17, likely due to a combination of a head injury and severe scurvy. The second tragedy occurred on March 17, when Lawrence Oates, suffering from crippling frostbite and realizing he was slowing his comrades, uttered the famous last words, "I am just going outside and maybe some time," walking voluntarily to his death in a blizzard to give his companions a chance. Despite Oates' sacrifice, Scott, Wilson, and Bowers were halted by a persistent blizzard just 11 miles from the one-ton depot, the major supply point that could have saved them. The final 3 died in their tent around March 29, 1912. Their frozen bodies in Scott's diaries, a testament to their stoicism and scientific dedication, were discovered by a search party the following spring. Legacy and analysis. The stark outcome of the race, Amundsen's comfortable success versus Scott's tragic demise, prompted extensive analysis and cemented their contrasting legacies. Amundsen's victory is universally attributed to his superior logistics, profound understanding of polar travel, and pragmatic adaptation of Inuit methods. His exclusive use of dogs, meticulous depot laying, appropriate clothing, and singular focus on the geographical objective proved the most effective strategy for survival and success in the Antarctic environment. His expedition demonstrated that polar exploration, fundamentally, is a logistical and engineering problem that must prioritize efficiency over tradition or national grandiosity. Scott's tragedy, while initially viewed through the lens of heroic, stoic failure by the British public, is now analyzed more critically. Key factors contributing to his demise include the failure of the transport system, motor sledges and ponies, the mismanagement of the supply depots, particularly the fateful distance of the one-ton depot, and a polar strategy that failed to fully embrace the proven techniques of the polar regions, relying instead on the arduous and inefficient practice of man-hauling for a substantial duration. Nevertheless, Scott's expedition yielded immense scientific data, which formed the foundation of much subsequent Antarctic research. The race to the South Pole remains a powerful historical narrative. It serves as a classic case study in the scientific method applied to exploration. Amundsen's success validated the approach of efficient preparation and cultural adaptation, while Scott's fate underscored the devastating consequences of logistical overcomplication and a failure to fully adapt to one of the Earth's most unforgiving environments. The ultimate lesson is that in the merciless extremes of Antarctica, the contest is not merely against a human rival, but against the continent itself, a contest won not by heroism alone, but by superior planning and respect for the environment's immutable laws.